The bells rang at midnight. I didn't see anyone pull the rope. The tower shook once and the sound bled into stone. I was standing in the nave of a ruined chapel outside Rome, the roof half gone, the air pressed against my chest like weight. There was no wind, but the candles bent, every flame leaning east. Something hung in the dark, a body, no rope around the neck, no wires, just suspended, slow rotation, arms slack, feet not touching the floor, eyes closed, lips moving. The children's voices came first, not one child, many, layered together like a choir rehearsed to perfection, a whisper that was too even, too synchronized, one word repeated in rhythm that never faltered. Dominus. The sound wasn't loud. It was inside the walls, inside my teeth. I could taste copper when it hit my tongue. I moved closer. My boots crushed glass. The air turned warm, then cold, then warm again in the span of 3 steps. The body spun, face turning toward me. The mouth opened. The eyes remained closed. The whisper didn't stop. The rhythm carried on, steady as breath. I stopped. I remember my hand tightening on the cross I carried, though no prayer came. My head wanted to form one, but the words were gone. Empty. The pitch shifted lower, still layered, still perfect. I don't think lungs made that sound. I don't think any living organ could. Another candle snapped. The wax sprayed as if struck, flame bursting before it vanished. Smoke rose straight up, then bent sideways against no wind. The bells rang again, louder. The body jerked once, twice, then still. It hadn't touched the floor. It hadn't fallen. Just a twitch, like something inside was adjusting its grip. I wanted to call out, to ask who was there. But I didn't. Something told me the answer would not be for me. It would be for whatever was already listening. The word stayed. Dominus. Drawn out this time, like the chapel itself had spoken. That should have been the first entry in the Black Chapel records. I didn't write it then. I only learned how to break rules later. I know better now. I didn't plan to speak that afternoon. I went because silence had started to feel heavier than sound. San Diego had its rhythm, the same every day. The ocean outside Coronado looked calm, blue spread wide, sunlight breaking it into coins that no one could hold. The base was long behind me, sealed in a drawer I refused to open. My days were smaller now, walks, sparse meals, and the same pew inside Our Lady of the Rosary. I went there because it smelled of wax and old wood. I went there because I could sit without questions. That church wasn't large, but it had weight. The doors were heavier than they looked, and when they closed, the city's noise stayed outside like an animal turned away. The cool air pressed against my chest. Dust turned golden in the beams that slanted through the high windows. On rehearsal days, you could hear a faint hum from behind a wall, voices counting, never words. That was enough for me. I sat near the back most times. Sometimes I didn't kneel. The quiet was the point. But that day I crossed to the confessional without meaning to. The curtain brushed my arm. The space was small, half dark. I heard my breath before I spoke. The other side shifted, and a voice I knew filled the air between the slats. "Afternoon," Father Moretti said, calm, not surprised. "Yeah?" My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "It's been a while. You don't have to say anything today." "I should," I told him. "Not everything, just enough." He didn't rush me. He never did. That patience was why I returned here when I could. I told him the nights weren't empty, that the bells came back in dreams, that I replayed the film in my head, the one that never ends where it should. He didn't push for details. He knew mercy was sometimes silence. Then he said my name, simply. "Dustin. There's a pilgrimage. Rome. I wasn't going to ask you, but I will now." I asked him why. "You'll see." 10 days. His voice stayed steady. "You'd be a quiet pilgrim." Quiet can be good company. I told him I wasn't good company. He said I didn't have to be. I said I didn't fit with groups. He said pilgrimages weren't groups, only individuals moving the same way. And that was the end of it. I should have said no, but I didn't. Something in the way the air changed inside that church told me another month exactly like the last one would finish me. I said I'd think about it. He told me that was all he wanted. 10 days later, I stood in St. Peter's Square. Geometry can humble you without speaking, and the colonnade told me what I already knew. I was small. The crowd moved like water, carrying flags and phones. Somewhere a child cried, and it sounded the same as every cry I'd ever heard. Father Moretti walked with me across the square until we reached Shadow, then told me he had someone to meet. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Inside the basilica, the air was cooler, marble holding centuries in its chill. Pilgrims craned their necks, whispering in languages I didn't catch. I lowered my head. Pilgrims do that. A man in black approached and asked me to follow. He spoke my language cleanly. Father Moretti sent me. It will not take long. We moved downward, through doors and passages that didn't appear on maps. The city's sound fell away. The air thickened. Stone absorbed every footstep. I stopped counting turns because the turns counted themselves. At the bottom of a stairwell, he opened a door. The chapel beyond was cut from black stone, an altar scarred by years of blades. Iron stands waited in silence. The air felt like a held note. At the far end, a tall man closed a book and turned to face me. He didn't raise his voice when he spoke. He didn't need to. "Welcome," Monsignor Hale said. His words carried the weight of dust and stone. "You are a guest. Nothing more. Do you understand that?" I do. Old habits still guided my answers. This place is called the Black Chapel. Not official, but accurate. You were a commander once. I was. "We don't need your past," he said. "We need your habits." He studied me for a long second, then nodded. A side door opened and 5 others entered the room. They didn't look at me as strangers. They looked at me as if they already knew where I fit. Ethan came first. His presence was straight lines and calm eyes. He offered his hand, firm but without challenge. He had been Swiss Guard once, and he still carried the discipline in his shoulders. Then Catherine, her veil plain, her eyes sharper than any blade. She said little, only that she read and prayed when reading failed. Petrova followed, his silence as heavy as his frame, eyes winter cold, a scar near his thumb. He spoke once, noticing my breathing. He said I breathed like a diver. Malric came next, smelling faintly of antiseptic, his coat hiding tools I didn't want to see. He said he closed holes, and sometimes made them. Last was Natalie, still as stone, her gaze calculating distance even when still. She told me she counted steps and heartbeats both. None of them needed more words. I understood enough. Hale stepped forward and placed a hand on the altar. His tone shifted. The room held still. This isn't a tour. It isn't a recruitment. But if a thing begins, it begins with rules. Rules are not holy, but they keep people alive long enough to understand holiness. He read them slowly with the cadence of ritual. Rule the first, never act alone. Rule the second, never answer when you hear your name whispered. Rule the third, never let the holy light extinguish. Rule the fourth, never question the command. Rule the fifth, never record what you see. He left the silence after long enough for each word to settle. I glanced at the others. Ethan's eyes flicked once to mine. Catherine lowered hers. Petrova's jaw shifted. Natalie's hand brushed the case at her side. Malric's gaze stayed fixed on the iron stands. They had all heard this before. Hale's voice carried again. "We are not explorers, not soldiers, not police. We work after dark. We keep the world believing darkness is absence. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't." No one asked questions. One of them exhaled. The other stayed still. Hale opened a small coffer, revealing relics wrapped in cloth. He lifted one, silver worn from hands, some edged like blades, others smoothed by years of prayer. You'll hold this when the room changes temperature, when silence feels louder than sound, when the light goes wrong. I repeated the words to myself. When the light goes wrong. They didn't feel real, not yet. He told us to remember Rule 3. He closed the coffer and turned back. You'll hear voices calling your names. They will not sound like strangers. They will sound like family. You must not answer. If you do, it will not be them you're speaking to. His eyes paused on me longer than I liked. Then he dismissed us. Eat, sleep. Do not dream if you can help it. The corridor back to the surface felt too bright. Rome above was a stage that knew it was a stage. Pilgrims filled the streets, carrying their burdens on their shoulders. I kept my head down. Ethan walked beside me long enough to say, "You'll get used to it." I told him I wouldn't. He said, "Fair." Catherine crossed near the stairwell and advised that if I heard counting in the dark, I should whisper, "Kyrie Ellison." Petrova said little, only reminded me of Rule 2. Natalie counted her own steps out loud as she passed. Malric gave me a nod that could have meant anything. That night I lay in a narrow bed in Domus Sanctae Marthae. The walls smelled of stone and polish. The ceiling shifted with shadows I didn't invite. I thought of writing something down, but Rule 5 was already carved beneath my ribs. You don't break rules on the first day. You don't break them when you still believe they're meant to keep you alive. The smoke detector glowed red above me. Not holy light, just a diode. I told myself it was enough. For that night, it was. We didn't wait long before the first mission. Rome hadn't even settled in my bones before the summons came. A sealed packet, no signature. Inside, one line, a church in Naples, abandoned. Reports of parishioners moving along the walls like lizards. No photographs, no testimonies signed. Just a note marked urgent. We took the train south, 6 of us seated apart like strangers. I watched the countryside flatten and rise again, vineyards giving way to stone. No one spoke much. Ethan read from a folded sheet, lips moving but no sound. Catherine clutched a rosary, though her eyes were elsewhere. Petrova dozed, but his muscles never slackened. Malric cleaned a small tool over and over. Natalie scribbled numbers in a notebook, her pencil making a rhythm steadier than the rails. The church lay in a quarter that smelled of salt and smoke. Its facade was cracked, graffiti layered over older graffiti, like time had tried to bury its own record. The doors were chained but broken. Pigeons scattered at our approach, wings loud enough to echo against the stone. And yet beneath it I smelled something that didn't belong. Frankincense, burned recently, though no mass had been held here in years. Ethan took lead. 2 and 2, he said quietly. Never alone. His eyes flicked to me. Rule 1. He didn't need to say it. We crossed the threshold. Cold hit like a tide. Not the cold of night air, but deeper, like the walls themselves carried the sea. The nave stretched wide, pews shattered, altar toppled on its side. Colored light bled weakly through stained glass. The air was too still. My teeth hurt in my jaw. I flexed them until the ache passed. Natalie set her lantern on low flame. "Light first," she murmured. The glow spread thin, bouncing off stone. The windows responded strangely. Our reflections appeared warped. Catherine stood still, yet in the glass her lips moved. Petrova's reflection turned his head before his body did. I blinked and rubbed my eyes. The images kept moving. "Rule 3, Natalie said, louder this time. Never let the holy light extinguish." She raised the flame higher. The reflections stuttered, then slowed, like reluctant actors caught in the spotlight. From deeper in the church, sound began, thin at first, then layered, swelling. Voices, a choir, high and pure, words in Latin stretched in precise Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. We all froze. The loft above the nave stood empty. Dust lay thick on the railing, but the music filled the air like it had been waiting. Echo, I told myself. Old walls hold sound. Nothing more. Catherine's eyes found mine. Echo doesn't sing the Sanctus. Malric exhaled sharply. Stone cavities. Pressure differentials. You want ghosts, you'll find ghosts. Then explain why it knows the words. His lips parted, but nothing came. Petrova muttered something in Russian and adjusted his grip on the lantern pole. Ethan raised a hand and we moved. Slow, quiet, tactical spacing. The floor creaked under our boots, but the sound that came back was too many feet, too light for us. The echo doubled us, then tripled. I felt my skin prickle as though we were surrounded. We took a side passage to clear the transept. The corridor smelled damp, stones sweating in places. Natalie marked time under her breath. 1, 2, 3, until Ethan cut her off with a glance. We passed frescoes half-eaten by mold. In one, an angel raised a sword. Its painted face had been scratched away by hands long gone. I stared too long and felt the eyes return my gaze. I forced myself forward. Petrova brushed my arm suddenly. Stop. His voice was low. He pointed at the wall. Finger marks trailed up toward the ceiling, gouges deep in plaster like someone had clawed their way upward. I tilted my lantern. The gouges ended halfway to the vault, then vanished. No body, no sign, just abrupt ending. That's consistent with hysteria, Malric said. Mass suggestion, nails tear, people climb until they can't. Catherine's whisper cut him. And vanish into stone. They glared at each other, their steps falling out of rhythm. Malric's jaw set, Catherine's eyes hardened. I half expected them to argue louder, but Ethan cut it short with 2 words. Rule 4. No one questioned command. Not allowed. We pressed deeper. A small side chapel opened to the right. The altar there had collapsed, but candles sat upright on the floor, wax fresh as if someone had placed them only hours before. None were lit, yet faint smoke hung in the air, curling against no draft. Someone's here, Natalie whispered. Or was, Ethan said. We left quickly. None of us wanted to see who might return. That's when it happened. A whisper slithered into the silence. My name. Dustin. Thin, water-warped, from behind the toppled altar. My throat locked. Rule 2. Never answer when you hear your name whispered. It came again. Dustin. This time it sounded like my mother. Then, like a voice I remembered from deployment, a man who had died because I had given the wrong order. My chest squeezed. My hands went numb. I didn't speak. Ethan's gaze cut toward me, sharp. He shook his head once. He'd heard it too. He didn't need to name it. We pressed forward. Every step felt wrong, like we were climbing into something's mouth. The whispers trailed us, brushing our ears. Then I saw Petrova falter. His head turned, slow. His lips parted as though to answer a voice only he could hear. Catherine reached and caught his wrist. No, she whispered, just that. His jaw tightened. He stayed silent, but I could see it, the near breaking. One breath more and he would have been gone. The altar loomed. The whispers ceased. The choir stopped mid-syllable. Silence collapsed like a stone wall. Dust hung frozen in the air. Our reflections in the stained glass, locked in unnatural poses, mouths half open, eyes too wide. My heartbeat sounded like footsteps. I gripped the reliquary Hale had given me. Cold at first, then hot, pulsing with heat that wasn't mine. I nearly dropped it. We thought it was over, but Ethan gestured to a stairwell half hidden behind the pulpit. Stone steps descended into dark. The lantern light barely reached the bottom. We moved down, boots sliding on dust. The air grew wetter, rank with mildew and something sharper, like copper. At the base stretched a crypt, rows of niches, some empty, some still sealed. But what froze us was the sound, dripping, regular, like water. Only when Malric touched the stone did we see the red smear on his glove. Not water. Drops of blood, slow, patient, from no visible source. They fell into a pool that reflected light wrong, the ripples out of sync with the drops. Catherine whispered a prayer. Malric muttered about underground pipes bursting. Their voices overlapped until Ethan hissed for silence. Then came the light. From deeper in the crypt, a glow, faint green. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Natalie raised her lantern, but the glow fought back, bending the shadows in the wrong direction. The reliquary in my grip seared hotter, almost unbearable. I pressed it against my chest and bit back a cry. We stepped closer, each pace slower than the last. The glow swelled once, twice, then vanished like a candle snuffed. The silence after was worse. My ears rang. For a moment I thought we'd gone deaf. Then the choir returned, not from above this time, but from below the stone floor. Hundreds of voices, rising through bone and dust. We fled back up the stair. At the nave the sound cut off, dead quiet. The lantern flame trembled, nearly extinguished before stabilizing. Natalie's knuckles were white around the handle. Ethan gave the order to withdraw. None of us argued. Outside, the night smelled of smoke and salt again. The city's noise returned like nothing had happened. But inside me, something shifted. The rules were no longer ritual, they were survival. And survival had just begun. We thought the night in Naples had ended with silence, but we were wrong. The church didn't release us. It waited. The reliquary in my hand cooled, then flared again like something inside refused to sleep. That was when the floor beneath the altar split with a sound like teeth grinding. Stone shifted, dust rose, and from the fracture, something pulled itself upward. It didn't climb the way a body climbs. It unfolded, jointless, like a shadow deciding to grow bones. Its face was blank until it wasn't. Features arranged and rearranged, mouths opening where eyes should be, eyes blinking where no skin should exist. The choir we had heard was still there, only now it was inside the thing. Hundreds of voices speaking as one, every pitch layered, every word sharp enough to cut air. Ethan shouted for formation. Petrova moved to his flank. Catherine raised the crucifix. Natalie's lantern threw light that warped instead of steadying. Malric cursed and fumbled for his instruments. I stood rooted, watching. The shadow being convulsed once and steadied. Then it laughed. Not one laugh, but many, like every child, every woman, every soldier I had ever heard, all layered into one. "You chase shadows," it said. The sound didn't leave its mouth. It came from the walls, from the ceiling, from inside my ribs. "But the last one walks in the light. He commands while you kneel." The words landed like hammers. We froze. Rule 4. Never question the command. The implication hung heavy. Our command wasn't who we thought. Monsignor Hale, the man who had welcomed us in Rome, who had spoken the rules like scripture. For a moment, no one breathed. "Hold the line," Ethan snapped. His voice carried, but I could hear the fracture in it. He knew what had been said. We all did. The creature bent forward, its limbs scraping stone, though they didn't seem solid. "You kneel to him." But he kneels to me. Catherine raised her crucifix higher and began to pray, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The prayer came fast in Latin, words older than the walls. The thing hissed and the voices inside it turned mocking, repeating the same prayer with perfect cadence, tone for tone. The mockery was worse than silence. Malric snapped his kit open, pulling out a syringe of clear liquid. "Nerve suppressant," he muttered. "Everything has a system. Even this." He jabbed the needle forward like it mattered. The point never reached. The liquid evaporated mid-air, steam twisting into shapes of faces before vanishing. The thing laughed again, louder. The glass windows shook until one shattered, raining fragments. In the shards, I saw not us but strangers, men hanging upside down, mouths open in screams, their eyes rolling. The reflection changed with every blink. I forced myself to look away. Then it spoke again, voice turned intimate, directed. "Ethan," it said. Ethan froze. "I see your oath. Guard of the gates. You swore, but you doubted. You told yourself the Swiss Guard was ceremony, not battle. But you wanted war. You needed it." Ethan's jaw clenched. He didn't speak. The rest of us looked at him but said nothing. Rule 4 hung above us like a blade. "Catherine," its voice shifted, softer, almost gentle. "You pray, but you don't believe. You carry beads, but your heart counts debts. You ask forgiveness for sins you plan to repeat." Catherine's face drained, but she didn't lower the crucifix. "Petrova." Now the tone was iron. "You drowned him. You let your brother sink so you could breathe one more hour. And you never told." Petrova growled low, shoulders rigid. He didn't deny it. His silence was confession enough. His eyes burned, but not at the demon, at himself. "Natalie," the choir shifted high, almost childlike. "You count. Always. But when the fire came, you lost track. 5 became 4. 4 became 3. You left them burning because the numbers broke." Natalie's lips parted, but no sound came. Her knuckles whitened around the lantern. The count she whispered every day now sounded like a chain around her neck. "Malric." Now it was cruel, sharp. "You stitched flesh alive to practice. You told yourself it was for medicine. You lied. You liked the screaming." Malric's eyes went wild, darting as if to argue, but no words formed. The denial never came. His silence screamed louder than any defense. Then it turned to me, the weight of all its voices pressed down. "Dustin," it whispered, my name in the tones of dead men, of the ones I had failed. 5 followed you into fire, 5 trusted, you led them wrong. They bled in sand and you live in stone. You confess, but confession doesn't return the dead. My chest caved under it. The reliquary seared my palm. I wanted to scream at it, to deny, but I couldn't, because it was true. My team had died because of me. No prayer had erased it, no mission would. For a moment I felt as if the floor tilted, pulling me toward the fracture where the demon had come. Part of me wanted to fall, to follow. Ethan shouted again, breaking the weight. "Lantern higher! Push it back!" Natalie obeyed, light flaring. The shadow being reeled, its features scattering into smoke. For a moment it seemed to weaken, but even as it shrank, it kept laughing. "You chase shadows, but the last one walks in the light." The words repeated, echoing as it dissolved into nothing. The choir faded. The air stilled, but the echo of the message remained. "He commands while you kneel." No one spoke at first. Catherine's lips moved, but no sound came. Ethan lowered his weapon slowly, eyes hard but distant. Petrova's shoulders heaved, sweat dripping though the air was cold. Malric closed his kit with shaking hands, muttering half-sentences. Natalie counted under her breath, but the numbers were broken, uneven, 5, 7, 6. Then silence. I stood with the reliquary still burning in my palm, whispering to myself, "It's lies. It wants division, but the seed had been planted. Hail. Could it be true? Could command be compromised? Rule 4 screamed in my head, never question the command. And yet I couldn't shake the image of his face, calm and certain, reading rules like scripture. If shadows lied, why did the lie feel so close to truth? We left the church in silence. Naples outside smelled of salt again, smoke from cooking fires drifting in the street, but none of us tasted it. We walked as if carrying coffins. Locals watched from corners, eyes suspicious, but no one approached. They must have felt it too, the way the church still breathed behind us. The train ride back to Rome was longer than the map allowed. Hours dragged. No one spoke. Catherine kept her rosary out, but the beads slipped through her fingers too quickly, no rhythm in them. Petrova sat stiff, his eyes fixed on the window, though the dark showed him nothing. Natalie wrote numbers, then scratched them out until the paper tore. Malric stared at his own hands as if he didn't recognize them. Ethan read again from his folded sheet, but his lips never moved this time. The silence pressed on us heavier than any hymn. And me? I watched the reflection in the window. My own face looked back, but sometimes, just for a blink, the eyes weren't mine. I gripped the reliquary in my coat pocket until my skin burned. I told myself Hale was clean, that the rules saved us tonight, that without them we'd be dead. But the whisper gnawed. He commands while you kneel. Doubt doesn't leave once it's spoken. It waits. It grows. We moved fast after Naples. Too fast. The missions blurred, one into another, like someone had turned pages too quickly and the ink smeared across the paper. None of us slept well. None of us spoke much. Hale sent us out again and again, and each time the world we stepped into bent a little more. Krakow. The basilica loomed heavy with smoke from candles that hadn't been lit. We entered to silence, but silence was never safe anymore. Natalie raised her lantern. The statues along the nave, all saints in stone, turned their heads, not slowly, not creaking. They turned in unison, instant, like a drill command, all eyes fixed forward, but not on the crucifix, on us. Ethan barked for formation, and Catherine nearly dropped her rosary. The reliquary in my palm seared hotter, pulsing like a second heart. Hale only lifted a hand, and the statues returned to stillness, but I swear I heard one of them whisper as it froze again. Lion. A chapel small enough to hide in one pocket of the city. Paintings older than memory lined the walls. Catherine whispered the names of saints as we passed. Then Malric stopped. The painting nearest him, Mary holding the child, began to bleed. Thick, dark, running straight down the canvas. Others followed one by one until the floor slicked red. Petrova grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. Hale stood still, unmoved, as though measuring the flow. We left quickly, but the smell of iron followed us through the streets until dawn. Mexico City. A different continent, but the same shadows. A man stood in the square outside a parish, his eyes black as tar. He lifted a car with one hand, not straining, not groaning. He set it back down like a toy. Crowds gathered, screaming, phones out, but the recordings all failed, screens cracking as though scorched. We engaged. Ethan, Petrova, and I circled, while Catherine pressed Latin prayers like weapons. The man's body contorted, bones cracking in rhythm with the bells. Hale arrived late, his stride uneven. He watched as if cataloging, not commanding. When the entity finally broke, collapsing into ash, Hale muttered only, "Recorded in no book." The anomalies grew thicker. Glass windows in every city cracked without impact. Lights flickered even with no power drawn. Once, inside a cathedral in Prague, laughter erupted from nowhere. Hundreds of voices at once, identical in pitch, timed perfectly. It lasted 10 seconds. 10 seconds that stretched into forever. The echoes didn't leave even when the sound stopped. I carried them in my teeth, the ringing, vibrating days later. One night, after Lion, Catherine vanished. One moment she was behind me, whispering the Kyrie. The next moment the space was empty, her voice gone. Panic erupted. We shouted Rule 1 into the dark, voices ragged. Then she reappeared, standing at the altar as though she'd been there all along, eyes blank, lips stained red. When Ethan asked where she'd gone, she blinked and said, "I never left." We never spoke of it again, but I noticed she never prayed quite the same after. Through all of it, Hale grew stranger. At first, small things. His eyes didn't always align. One pupil dilated when the other stayed pinprick. His steps dragged uneven, one leg longer than the other, though he showed no limp. At first, I thought fatigue. Too many nights, too many shadows. But the changes sharpened. Sometimes his shadow didn't follow the light. Sometimes it stretched in the wrong direction. Once, in Mexico, I swear I saw it detach for a breath before snapping back into place. I tried to ignore it. I told myself stress builds monsters from ordinary shapes, but the seed from Naples had been planted. The demon's words, "He commands while you kneel." They returned every time Hale entered a room. The corruption followed us home. In the barracks beneath the Vatican, mirrors began to fog without heat. Doors slammed when no one touched them. Once, the bells in St. Peter's rang at midnight, though no rope moved. Another night, all our candles extinguished at once, plunging us into black. The silence was broken by a single cough, and none of us had made it. We didn't speak of that either. I watched Hale closely. During meals, he sometimes froze mid-motion, fork lifted, mouth still. His chest didn't rise, no breath, until one of us glanced at him. Then suddenly, movement returned, as though the act of watching reanimated him. Catherine noticed too. She crossed herself more often, even outside missions. One night in Rome, after Mexico, I broke. I waited until the others had gone to quarters, then intercepted Hale in the corridor. The lantern light flickered low, catching his face half in shadow. "You're not the same," I said. My voice came harsher than I intended. He stopped, looking down at me like I'd spoken out of turn. "Exposure changes men. You've been close to them too long. Hallucinations happen. You'll see what isn't there." "I see your eyes," I whispered. He stepped closer. "Then look harder. There's nothing here but discipline. You question because you're weak. Remember Rule 4. His voice struck like a lash. I dropped my gaze, but the doubt held. I walked away, but my hands shook until morning. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited. When the halls fell silent, I slipped into the corridor again. Hale's door stood closed. I pressed my ear to the wood. At first, nothing. Then a sound, low and steady, breathing, but not human, too deep, too wide, like a bellows dragging the air. I pushed the door open an inch. Light leaked from within, not flame, not lamp. A glow like coal smoldering. On the far wall stretched a shadow. But it wasn't Hale's. It was enormous, twice the height of a man, horns curling, arms like broken branches. The body was wrong, bending where no joints should be. And yet it moved when Hale shifted in his chair, the silhouette tethered to him like a parasite. I shut the door fast, heart hammering. I pressed my back to the stone and waited for the shadow to seep under. It didn't. But the certainty had settled. Hale was no longer Hale. Something wore him like vestments, and we followed him blindly. I returned to my room and wrote nothing. Rule 5. Never record what you see. The words burned in me, but not as much as the sight of that shadow burned behind my eyes. For the first time, I wished the rules had never been written, because now I knew why they existed. They weren't meant to keep us alive. They were meant to keep us obedient. The final night broke the world open. We had followed Hale into the crypt beneath the Vatican. His stride was uneven, his shoulders bent, but he still moved with authority. We all knew, even if no one spoke it. The demon's words from Naples had finally flowered. He commands while you kneel. And now the shadow wore him fully. The chamber shook as we entered. Candles along the walls flared and then bent sideways, their flames pointing against gravity. Latin prayers spilled from somewhere unseen, twisted, warped, a chant in reverse. The stone itself groaned, like the building resisted hosting what had taken root. Then Hale changed. His eyes rolled back, his body convulsed, and the shadow inside tore its way free. Horns pressed through skin without breaking it, as if two realities occupied the same space. His voice came out doubled, then tripled, layers of tones stacked until words became weapons. Ethan moved first. He charged with the reliquary blade, shouting the creed. The air folded around him, but he held steady, buying us a moment. Natalie screamed as shards of glass rained from nowhere, cutting into her arm. She didn't drop the lantern. Its light wavered, weak but alive. When the light flared, Catherine was simply gone. Only her rosary lay in the crack of the floor, beads warm as if they still carried her pulse. Petrova disappeared in smoke. One breath he was beside me. The next there was only a burst of red mist and the echo of a cry swallowed before it finished. Malric turned, scrambling for his case, muttering formulas, but the wall beside him rippled. It became mirror, then water, then nothing. His body was swallowed into the surface, hands beating once, twice, then gone. Only cracks remained, spidering through stone. I tried to run forward, but my body felt pinned. The air was thick as tar. Hail, or what wore him, lifted its arms and every candle went black. The darkness didn't hide, it revealed. Figures lined the walls, hundreds of them, faceless but familiar. I heard my team's voices, the ones I'd lost years ago, calling me commander. Their mouths opened, but no sound came, only the tolling of bells. Ethan's shout broke through. Now! He forced himself into the creature's path, his body breaking against the wave of sound. He didn't fall back. He held it. And in that single moment of defiance, I saw Hale's face twist, not in rage, but in pain. For a breath, his own voice emerged, thin but sharp as a blade. "Do it!" he gasped. "Now or never!" My hands shook. The reliquary burned like a star in my grip. To strike meant ending him. To hesitate meant the world bending until nothing human remained. I saw the doubt in his eyes, fear, sorrow, command. He was still Hale, trapped inside, begging me to finish what he couldn't. I screamed and drove the relic forward. The light tore from it, red and white, fire and salt. It cut through him, through shadow and flesh alike. The scream that followed wasn't his. It was deeper, endless, clawing into the marrow of every bone in the crypt. The walls cracked, the air ignited, and then it was gone. Silence rushed back. Hale collapsed, eyes finally still, his chest unmoving. The shadow was gone, but so was he. Ethan lay twisted, body broken. Natalie clutched her bleeding arm, her face gray with shock. Petrova was nowhere. Malric's tools lay scattered, but his hands never returned to claim them. I staggered forward. My chest burned. My ribs cracked. I dropped to my knees beside Hale's body. His mouth hung open as if to speak, but no sound remained. I closed his eyes with a hand that trembled more than it should. Then I stood, because standing was the only thing left to do. We left the crypt broken. 5 of us went in with Hale. 2 walked out. I carried Hale's relic in one hand, Natalie leaning against my other shoulder. The Vatican above us seemed unchanged. Tourists walked the square. Pigeons circled the obelisk. The city didn't know the ground beneath it had just consumed lives. Days blurred. My wounds bound, my body patched, my mind never healed. Natalie didn't speak. Her lantern sat dark beside her bed. The Vatican offered no funerals, no graves. The Black Chapel swallowed its dead as it always had. Rule 5, never record what you see, kept our mouths closed. Silence was the only monument, but silence didn't hold. The bells returned, at first faint, then heavier. One evening as I walked alone past the nave of St. Peter's, they rang. No hands on the ropes, no wind on the air, but they rang. The same tone I'd heard on the first night in Naples, the same tone that had followed me since San Diego. I pressed my palms to my ears. The sound burrowed deeper. Not outside, inside. The bells were mine now. I thought of Ethan, of Petrova, of Malric, of Hale, commanding until the end. I thought of the rule that had anchored us and how it had been broken from the inside. I thought of the demon's promise, and how even in death its echo remained. The world hadn't reset, it hadn't healed, it only waited. And I was still breathing, carrying both the relic and the doubt, neither one lighter than the other. When the bells stopped, the silence after felt worse than sound. The circle was complete. Naples had rung them first, Rome had rung them last, and they would ring again until someone else listened, or until I couldn't anymore. San Diego waited for me like nothing had happened. The streets were the same, the salt air heavy from the harbor, the sun warm on the skin. People laughed, argued, lived as though the ground beneath Rome hadn't torn open. I walked those streets carrying weight no one else could see. Our Lady of the Rosary stood unchanged, its doors open, its candles lit. I hadn't stepped through since before the summons, but my feet found the way without thought. The confessional smelled the same, wood, polish, faint incense clinging to the corners, and Father Moretti's voice greeted me with the same calm as ever. "Welcome home," he said, gentle, familiar, the tone that had steadied me before Naples, before Hale, before the shadows learned my name. I sat in silence. The wood creaked. He asked nothing, pressed nothing, only waited. When I left the booth, he smiled with the same patience, the same warmth. No judgment, no suspicion, just the face of a man who had stood here for years. Outside, the sun fell low. The city tilted into evening, the bells of the harbor striking 6. I walked slowly, each step heavier than it should be. The reliquary burned against my chest beneath the coat, but I didn't remove it. I would never remove it again. I told myself I was tired, that wounds still ached, that my mind had not settled. I told myself what Hale had told me once: exposure warps the senses. See long enough, and the ordinary twists into monsters. "I'm just not stable yet," I whispered. "That's all. Just tired." But halfway down the steps, I stopped. My breath locked. Father Moretti stood in the doorway, watching me go. And for the briefest instant, so brief I might have blinked, it happened. His eyes shifted. The color broke, sliding into black, the pupils widening until no white remained, a gaze too deep, too steady, not belonging to any man. Then it was gone. He raised his hand in blessing, calm, familiar, the face unchanged. I walked on. I didn't look back. The street ahead blurred, the bells from the harbor tolling again, though the hour hadn't changed. The harbor bells tolled too even, too perfect, like children trained to breathe in unison. I told myself I was tired, that my mind was cracked, that the war had never ended. But inside, I already knew. The shadow had crossed the ocean.
The battle's not over yet.